So, on March 2nd, 2025, something happened that might have flown under your radar. A seemingly small change was made to a presidential directive. But, and this is the key part, it's a change buried in some pretty dense legal language that could actually have a big impact on your online shopping. Today, we're going to deconstruct Executive Order 14227 and figure out exactly what it does and why you should probably care. Right, so whenever a document like this drops from the White House, we all have the same question, don't we? What does it actually do? Forget the jargon, what's the real-world impact? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to cover the basics. What even is a presidential directive? Then we'll get into the real meat of it, this change to something called de minimis. We'll look at why they're doing this, who's actually in charge of flipping the switch, and finally, what it all means for the future. Okay, so first things first. Before we can even begin to understand this specific order, we've got to get some crucial context on what a presidential directive is and how it even works. So, what are we really talking about? Well, at its simplest, an executive order is basically a set of instructions from the president to the federal government. It's a really powerful tool for managing how everything operates, and it's based on powers from the Constitution or laws that Congress has already passed. And here's something really important to get. These orders don't just pop up out of nowhere. As you can see from this timeline, Executive Order 14227 is actually just the third step in a sequence. It amends an order from February 3rd, which itself amended an order from way back on February 1st. So what we're looking at here is really just the latest little tweak to an existing policy, not some brand new idea. All right, now that we've got that context, let's get to the main event. We're diving into the heart of this new order, the de minimis change. This is the part we really need to decode. Okay, deep breath. I know this looks like a wall of dense legal text pulled straight from the document, but stick with me here. We're going to break it down. The only phrases you really need to focus on are duty-free de minimis treatment and shall cease to be available. Let's unpack what that actually means. So, what on earth is de minimis? Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is like an express lane, but for international shopping. If you buy something from another country and its value is low enough, this rule lets it zip right through customs without having to stop at the tariff toll booth. It's a long-standing tax exemption for small packages. Okay, so let's put it side by side. This really makes the change crystal clear. Before this orders directive gets activated, that customs express lane is wide open. But after it's activated, for the items covered by the original order, that lane slams shut. The exemption will cease. So you can see the core job of this new order is basically to set the stage for that switch to happen down the road. Right, so that's the what. But that brings up the big question, why? Why make this change at all? Well, turns out the answer is spelled out pretty clearly in the original order that this one is built on top of. Yep. You don't have to dig too deep for the answer. The why is spelled out right there in the title of the original executive order from back in February. This whole series of actions is explicitly about imposing duties to address the situation at our southern border. So this new amendment is really just one more piece in that much larger policy puzzle. And the new order itself gives us a huge clue about when this all goes down. The exemption ends once adequate systems are in place to fully and expeditiously process and collect tariff revenue. So put simply, this whole amendment is about getting the government's plumbing, its infrastructure, ready to start collecting these new taxes on stuff that right now is totally exempt. But who gets to decide when those systems are adequate? That's a really key detail, right? Because it's not like a switch just flips automatically. And that's where the Commerce Department comes into the picture. Okay, so let's just cut to the chase and ask the question that I know is on your mind. Has this already happened? Has this tax exemption for all those little packages gone away yet? And the answer is a very clear no, not yet. And this is why. It's actually a three-step process. First, the government has to go and build these new systems for collecting tariffs. Step 2, and this is the absolute linchpin of the whole thing, the Secretary of Commerce has to officially certify that those systems are good to go and tell the president. Only then, and not a moment sooner, does the rule actually change. So that's the what, the why, and the how of this executive order. Let's wrap this up by putting it all together and looking at what comes next. All right, let's do a quick recap. If you remember nothing else, remember these 4 things. 1, this order is just an amendment, not a totally new policy. 2, its whole purpose is to get ready to end that de minimis tariff exemption for some items. 3,
And this is a big one. The change is not immediate. And 4, the whole thing hinges on a future go-ahead from the Secretary of Commerce.
You know, when you boil it all down, this executive order is really about laying the groundwork, getting the government's machinery ready for a policy change. But it leaves us all with a much, much bigger question. Once those systems are finally built and that certification is made, how is this going to change the cost of all that stuff we buy online from other countries? That is the real billion-dollar question, isn't it? And that's the impact that we're all going to have to keep an eye on.